right, welcome back to the Krueger Show. Larry Krueger with you on a Monday. We're talking Niner football. Niners had the rookie minicamp over the weekend. Jordan Elliott writes for NinersNation.com, and he's fantastic. And I've followed him on Twitter. He's a great follow on Twitter, and he's with us on the Krueger Show to talk Niner football. Hey, Jordan, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. It feels like it's almost football season, even though we're sitting in the middle of May. It's 49ers always giving us something to talk about.
Seriously, never a shortage of topics. And tell people about yourself who maybe don't know about you or learning about you for the first time. Tell them about yourself and what kind of thing, what's your background and how long you've been writing on covering the 49ers.
So I've been covering the 49ers for a couple seasons now. I started in 2020, and I work now for Niners Nation, which is a part of SB Nation, and I'm a staff writer there covering them. I've been doing that since last summer, so 2021 was my first full season with them doing that, and I write about 3 or 4 articles every week for them, sometimes more, depending on what's going on, where we're at with the calendar. And that's where the majority of my work will be. I'm also on Twitter. I have my @ here on the screen, @JayleeElliott. I try to put out stuff that maybe won't go into an entire article, but any stats, numbers. I'm a big stats guy, so any cool numbers, interesting facts that come in about these players, especially this time of year with so many players coming in as draft selections, undrafted free agents, and guys are bringing in for workouts. Between NinersNation.com and Twitter, that's where you'll find the majority of my work.
Let's get right into the 49er draft. What did you think of it? They started with Drake Jackson out of USC. It was the 61st pick overall. They didn't have a first-round pick because of the Trey Lance trade. What did you think of the Jackson pick?
I really liked it. I was kind of pounding the table for it as he kept falling. I didn't think he was going to make it to 61. He's somebody who I had personally going somewhere between late 30s, early 40s in that second round. So when it was getting, to pick 50, 55, and you're still on the board, I was like, hey, they should trade up and go get this guy. So the fact they were able to get him without moving any capital to move up to get him, I think is a major win. And I think it really reinforces what's made this team so great, and that is their commitment to really building the trenches, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And whether they're picking at 3 or 14 or at 2 when they pick Nick Bosa, if they have the chance to take a guy that can make an impact on that defensive line with their first draft selection, they've shown they're going to do it. And I think they got a guy at the back end of the second round that not only has potential to be an impact player on the defensive line, I think he has a Pro Bowl kind of ceiling with the traits and the tools that he has. And you pair him with a defensive line coach like Chris Kocurek. You get him on the same defensive line as guys like Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa, who are going to command a tremendous amount of attention. I really think that while it may take some time to get there, the ultimate ceiling you get with Jackson is way too good to pass up at 61. And I'm very impressed that they didn't reach for maybe a position of need, and they went to the well where they've had proven success drafting guys on the defensive line.
Do you think he's a plug-and-play starter or week one, or do you think he'll play in a rotation? How do you see them breaking him in?
I think he's going to be more of a rotational guy, probably somebody that when they're getting those wide 9 looks on third down, somebody you kind of put in on obvious passing situations. I do think he has the potential to be a 3-down defensive end edge guy. I don't think that it's something I would necessarily do right away, simply based on the fact that, as of now, I thought Samson Ebukam really came on towards the end of last season, and he's somebody who I think just has a bit more familiarity with the scheme, playing on that defensive line. So he's somebody I'd probably feel a little bit more comfortable with as that starting edge opposite Bosa on base downs. It seems like they're going to keep Eric Armstead inside. Obviously, things change if they have Armstead back outside on base downs, but for now, I just think they have a little bit better options rather than throwing the rookie out right away and putting too much on his plate. I think giving him that role where it's like, hey, we want you to work on your bend, work on your pass rushing moves. Your job is going to be to get after the quarterback right away. I think that's going to set him up for much better immediate success, and in turn will give the 49ers better success as well.
Niners went with Ty Davis-Price at LSU. Is he going to be the number 1 back this year?
I was so surprised by that pick, Larry. I'll be honest. I nailed a few of these picks with my mock drafts and stuff. I did not have a single mock draft with Tyron Davis-Price. I think he is somebody that is slated for that role. I don't know if he will be right away, but his size and his speed, he has a combination of both that I don't really see anybody else on the roster currently possessing. And I think he is a guy who looks like he's built to handle that 15 to 20 carry per game workload. as admirable as I think Elijah Mitchell played last year, and especially considering he's a 6th-round pick, and he basically was, it felt like the only running back Shanahan trusted down the stretch. I think TDP is a little bit more well-equipped to handle that 18 per game carry workload that Mitchell saw last year. So I think it may not happen right out of the gate week 1, but I think we'll see a similar thing where down the stretch run, he's the guy that's really commanding the lion's share of work in the backfield.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that, the premise kind of this whole sit down today was, are the 49ers in or outside their Super Bowl window? And I think you can make an argument either way. That's why I think it's a good topic. Where would you put them at this point? I was debating this with Grant Cohn on his channel a few weeks ago and before the draft. And he was like, I thought that they are outside the Super Bowl window until kind of Trey establishes that he's a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. He believes in Trey as, maybe more so because he thinks they're inside their Super Bowl window and really tied it to the presence of Deebo Samuel. Where are you in that question? Is the Niners Super Bowl window open? Is it to be determined based on Trey? Is it closed because it's not open until Trey shows us something? Where do you weigh in on that question?
I would say it's open, but I would add the context that I agree with what you're saying when it comes to, we really don't know what Trey Lance is going to be. So my thinking is that it's open because the 49ers, in my eyes, still have one of the best 5 rosters in the NFL. I think they still, as currently constructed, 1 through 53, can go head-to-head with anybody. And my thinking with this is, while I am of the thought that Trey Lance is an unknown at this point because we've only seen him in action in a couple games, I really like the ceiling. I like the player. I think he can be great. The reason why I'm still in on the Super Bowl window is because I don't think you need a major, amount of production from Trey Lance to be that Super Bowl team. I think if Trey Lance can come in and just be somewhere between the 12th to 20th best quarterback in the NFL, the rest of the roster is so good that I think we can see them go on a run similar to what they did last season. With all due respect to Jimmy Garoppolo, he's an average NFL quarterback at best to me, and I think that he's somebody that was able to hit open throws when they were schemed up, and was somebody that was able to execute the offense to the extent that they were playing in the NFC Championship game. And I just think Trey Lance is capable of providing that floor. I don't think it's a given, and I think there will be growing pains considering the jump he's making from not only college to the NFL, but also the FCS to the NFL. There will be adjustments. You just need game reps to sort a lot of that stuff out. But I do, again, come back to the fact that I think they really just need an average NFL quarterback kind of performance from Trey Lance over the course of 17 games, and I think he's capable of providing that.
What's your biggest concern with Lance?
Right now, it would probably be it's something that's improved, but it would be the kind of hitch in his throwing motion. I think that that's something that got better from that Arizona start to the start he made against the Texans in week 17. So there has been an improvement just in the 1 year he's been with the 49ers, but that throwing motion is a little bit elongated. And I do think it's something that does need to be tightened up a little bit, but the progress is there. It's just a matter of continuing to build on that. And the other thing that would be a concern maybe is, how will he respond to adversity? Because we haven't really seen that yet. I'm not saying I'm concerned that he won't be able to do it. It's just, that game against the Texans, I thought he did really well rebounding in the second half, but it was a game at home. It was a game against a team that, wasn't the strongest opponent. I'm really interested to see what it's like for him on this stage when he has to go into SoFi Stadium. He has to go into Arizona, or I guess they're playing Mexico City this year. Sorry, but he has to go, against a tough opponent, division on the line, things like that. We haven't seen it yet. So I'm just interested to see how it goes. And again, I'm not a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy, but I have to give him credit. He went into a lot of those hostile environments and big moments, and the 49ers were able to win football games, not directly attributing the credit to him. But I just think that my biggest concern with Lance, I guess, would be an unknown, because again, I'm not doubting he has the ability to do that. We just haven't seen it yet. And I think the bar is set much higher than people maybe want to realize, because the 49ers have been at least in an NFC Championship game in 2 of the last 3 years. So I do think that there is a little bit of expectation that Trey Lance has to hit the ground running right away. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out given the pressure that he's going to be facing.
Interesting comments in the chat. Brash Cat says, until we get to see what Trey Lance is on third downs, we won't really know about him. And then he adds this one. My biggest concern with Trey Lance is his head coach using him like he was Larry Zonka. Obviously, a reference to the Arizona game, running through the A gaps on quarterback power. I guess my biggest concern, and I voiced this the other day, is that somebody said, "Oh, well, his feet are pitter patter in the pocket," and he suggesting that he's scared. I think the opposite. I think he keeps his eyes downfield. I think, if anything, he doesn't have the appropriate amount of fear. When I watched his college tape, he seemed more than willing to kind of, seek contact in the open field and throw a shoulder. When I saw him against Arizona, he did the same thing. I don't want to see Trey run people over. I don't care if he can. You know what I mean? There's bigger, stronger, badder guys in this league, and you're not going to last very long. And I want to see Trey demonstrate consistent and Kyle demonstrate consistent awareness of risk reward. No more 2-yard runs running your quarterback up the A gap just because he's kind of bulky or he's kind of athletic. Treat him like a quarterback, because when he's down, you're still going to Nate Sudfeld. You're still going to Brock Purdy. So you don't want him to get hurt. To me, I think if Trey had a little bit more fear, if Kyle had a little bit more fear for Trey, I think that would serve him well. Give me your thought.
Yeah, I agree completely. I believe it was Isaiah Simmons on the Cardinals that stuffed him on that goal line run, where I'm sure for the majority of his career playing quarterback, he's leveling that linebacker, defensive back, and getting across the goal line. He gets stopped an inch short of the goal line because, just like you mentioned, these guys are bigger, faster, stronger than what he's gone up against. And that kind of ties into, again, my concern is just more so that it's a different game at the NFL level, and it's going to take some time for Trey Lance to get accustomed to that. I think he's more than up to the challenge, and I think that he's going to be a very good player for the 49ers for a long time. But I also think this is where I'm kind of hesitant to go out and predict them to win 13 games this year, because there will be those growing pains. He's going to have to take a couple of those hits, like you mentioned, in the open field, where it's kind of like, maybe I should slide and get down, or maybe I should sacrifice that extra 5 yards and run out of bounds. So I definitely think you make a great point with that. I unfortunately just think it's something where you have to get hit a few times before you can really, come to that conclusion. I think he's going to unfortunately have to learn through trial and error when it comes to some of that stuff.
Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback?
I think it has to be Nate Sudfeld. With the money they guaranteed him, it's $2 million, which may not seem like much given what some other backup quarterbacks are making. But to guarantee it to a guy like Sudfeld, who spent the majority of last season on the practice squad, to me really sends a message that they are committed to having him in that role. And even just reading into little things like, they went to the Warriors game a couple nights ago together. They're doing events here in the Bay Area. They're both here working with some of the rookies. They were at the facility during the rookie mini camp this past week. So I just think that all the signs are kind of pointing to it being a Trey and Sudfeld-led room. And then we see what happens with Purdy. I think he most likely ends up on the practice squad. But I still think they're trying to get something for Jimmy Garoppolo. It's just a matter of him getting healthy, being able to pass a physical and all that stuff. Things change as, teams get into training camp, and there may be a team that doesn't really need a quarterback now that needs one a couple months from now. But I don't think they're in a position where it's I don't see how Jimmy stays on the roster. So by default, I'm going to say it's Sudfeld.
What happens to Debo?
I think he's going to get extended at some point. I truthfully thought the 49ers were going to end up moving him. I was surprised that he ended up staying. And I thought that the best idea was for them to keep him. But just the way things kind of played out, it felt like maybe they were going to move him to the Jets. I think they deserve a lot of credit for standing firm and rejecting offers that I didn't think were very good. I thought that Jets offer wasn't even great, considering they wanted the 49ers to send back 61, where again they got a player in Drake Jackson who I really like, getting back I think the 10th pick and a 5th round pick. I think that Deebo Samuel is a player that's just too vital to what you've done and too unique of a player where you're going to have a really, really hard time replacing what he brings to your offense, where you find a way to maybe work in some incentive stuff, make the guarantees respectable enough that he's willing to sign a deal, and kind of front load it. I don't like doing, cross-sport comparisons, but I'd kind of do it similar to what we've seen Farhan do with the Giants, where you're getting these guys who are premium talents, but you're loading up deals 2 to 3 years rather than spreading that money out farther down the line. And I think with a player like Debo, I'd be really confident loading up those guarantees and that, bigger cap hit for 2 to 3 seasons, where I still believe he'll be playing at a high level. I think this season and next season, for sure, we're going to see Debo at this MVP level. And he still has a chance to be a guy 3 years from now where he's worth the price tag that you're signing him at now. I just don't see a scenario where you can go into this season without making him feel like he's being taken care of financially and getting something done.
We're talking to Jordan Elliott, Niners Nation. As you can tell, he's a wealth of information as we break down all things Niners. All right, Danny Gray. I thought that was the pick that I was rooting for. He was the receiver that even before the draft, I did a video saying I felt like he was the best fit because I think his 4.33 is kind of an understatement if you watch him play. He plays in a 4.2 range, and you see that speed. If anything, you see faster than that. And to me, he's exactly the piece that they needed to complement Debo, Ayuk, Jawan, Jennings, Kittle, if all those guys are back this year. So I love the Gray pick. I think he creates a ton of space on the football field, and he makes sure that those other weapons take fewer hits. Give me your thought on Danny Gray, and obviously he was the star of the rookie minicamp.
Absolutely. So the two biggest needs that I thought the 49ers needed on offense in terms of skill position was they needed a physical, bruising running back that could handle a big workload, which I think they addressed with the pick prior. And I thought they needed somebody that could take the top off of a defense, which I think they got with Danny Gray. And I think the thing with him is that you're right. He does look like he's playing at 4-2. He is a guy that has the ability to stretch defenses vertically, really open things up underneath for those yak guys in Kittle, Ayuk, Debo. But I think the thing with Danny Gray that doesn't really get talked about enough, or at least that I haven't seen very much, is that he's a guy who is very dangerous with the ball in his hands in space. He's somebody that, yes, he has that straight line speed. He has that ability to hit that second gear, but he also looked to me like somebody who navigated traffic over the middle of the field really well. Somebody that, while he may be very dangerous running go routes up the seam, he also could be a guy that's catching 1-3-step slants, these little crossing routes in the short to intermediate area, and really creating havoc with the ball in his hands after. He just looked like somebody that had a really, really good understanding of creating his own running lanes and getting to a spot where he could really open up that top end speed we've seen from him.
It's interesting. We all talk about speed, but then, Cooper Kupp's the best receiver going, right? And he ran 4.62. We're all fans of the Niners, and Jerry Rice ran 4.55 or whatever it was coming out of Mississippi Valley. And yet the 40 time. The Niners picked up a couple receivers after the draft that were good college receivers. I mean, Taysier Mack was Pickett's number one guy at Pittsburgh. He was the deep threat. And if you watched Oklahoma State or Wazoo in the previous years, Tay Martin, and I was talking to Matt Barrows about this guy, big play Tay, was huge in the bowl game. He had 9 catches for 110 yards and 3 touchdowns, and he was the reason the Oak State maybe pulled the upset against Notre Dame. He was great in the Big 12 title game as well, and he just had a very productive year in his second program. He was really good at Wazoo. I like both those guys, and Matt said they kind of showed something in the rookie minicamp. This is an area where Shanahan's interesting because he reached for Dante Pettis, and they've swung and missed on some guys, but also he's found Kendrick Bourne and some other guys, and maybe Tay Martin and Taysier Mack are more Shanahan finds. It seems like he's got a unique eye for wide receiver talent.
Absolutely. And the one thing I always personally watch for when it comes to 49ers receivers and doing this stuff pre-draft and who might be a good fit is I pay much more attention to the short shuttle than the 40 time, because it feels like that's really where Kyle Shanahan kind of zeroes in on these guys. Like Kendrick Bourne went undrafted, but he had that 4.21 short shuttle. Tay Martin's another guy where he had I believe it was 4.33 was a short shuttle. So you look at these guys where Kyle's really able to find these athletes who are really good at changing direction, kind of adds into that yak ability, that creating in space over the middle. And I think that that's something where it kind of just feels like maybe a metric that's undervalued in the scouting community, where Kyle Shanahan's taken advantage of it for years. Even go back to 2019, that was one of the reasons why I never thought DK Metcalf was a possibility for the 49ers, because he didn't run the greatest short shuttle. He didn't have the best 3-cone time when he's, at the combine going through these drills. And it feels like the common denominator amongst a lot of these players that the 49ers are targeting in that later range really just comes back to that short shuttle time.
Yeah, it's the short area quickness. I remember 49er scout from the 80s told me that even way back then when they had Tony Rosano running things, that they were big into quabs, quickness, agility, balance, and strength. And they kind of graded guys out on those things. And if you had those things, you were higher in their eyes. And sometimes you can find players who are, both those guys were productive college football players in big conferences. So if you can do it in the ACC, if you can do it against Notre Dame, in South Bend, you probably can do it in the NFL. Not always, but usually. How about offensive line? Interesting picks of offensive linemen in that they drafted Burford, I should say, out of UTSA. And, I heard there were a number of people that thought that he was a sleeper candidate, but now they're saying maybe he needs to put on a little weight. Donovan West in the draft guide that I had him going 61 to the Niners, the pick they used on Drake Jackson, and he went undrafted out of ASU. Jason Poe looks like an athlete out of Mercer. Sam Schluter played left tackle at Minnesota, and Zakel played at Fordham and went, looks like a tough guy, basically tough and smart, and that's a good combination as far as traits of a prospect you want to develop. What do you think of their O-line, and who do you think left to right is penciled in as the ones going into camp on the O-line for the Niners?
I really liked the strategy that it felt like they employed when they were selecting these offensive linemen, where it was, we might be sacrificing a little bit of immediate floor, but we're going to take guys who are just tremendous athletes and bank on our own coaching staff and our own scheme to get the most of those physical abilities. If you look at guys like Burford and Zakel and Poe and even Donovan West, they all are tremendous athletes. They're really good at moving in space. They have these just eye-popping physical gifts. And I do think there is, again, a common theme where maybe you don't feel great about throwing any of them into a prominent role right away. But I think that there's enough physical ability to tap into there that it's worth the risk. And especially when you're considering all these picks were made on day 3, I think that the 49ers are a victim of their own success in a way where people are assuming they're going to hit on these really good, skilled players every year in the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds because they've done that in years past. To me, my whole thing is when you're getting to day 3 and this late in the draft, you're really at, the whole draft's a crapshoot. But at this point, you're really just hoping you can find guys that can stick on an NFL roster. And I think that really betting on that athleticism is they're kind of swinging for the fences in a way. And I'd much rather see that than trying to be safe and take high floor guys with limited ceilings. Because again, to me, the odds of players being selected late on day 3 or coming in as undrafted free agents, it's going to be hard to make the majority of NFL rosters, but especially one as talented as the 49ers. So I really like that they bet on the athletic ceiling, it felt like, across the board with these selections. And then in terms of the starting offensive line, Trent Williams is a lock as of now. It sounds like they're going to keep Aaron Banks at right guard. I thought he might be playing left guard, but it sounds like he's going to stay on the right side. So this is where it gets really interesting for me, because at this point, I still think that Dan Brunskill is their best option at either guard spot, given the experience he has in the system, the NFL reps that he has under his belt. But he also might be their best option at center. So I would guess that maybe a guy like Jalen Moore slides into that left guard spot, and then you have Brunskill at center, Banks at right guard, and then McGlinchey, if he's healthy enough, will absolutely be the right tackle. But will he be healthy enough to play? That remains to be seen. But as of now, I haven't heard that he won't be back by then. So I would say McGlinchey, but so much of it is a little bit unclear right now because Alex Mack hasn't really declared if he will be coming back or he's retiring. And at this point, where do the 49ers really pivot to center? To me, I don't see anybody else on the roster that gives them the wealth of experience that Daniel Brunskill has, given the snaps he's taken at the NFL level. And he personally doesn't, he doesn't have that much himself. There's just nobody else that really does. And I don't know that Kyle Shanahan will be willing to put Donovan West in that role right away. And I really like Zakel at center going forward, but it just comes back to, I don't know that Kyle Shanahan's going to trust a rookie to be kind of the anchor of that offensive line at the center position. So I wish I could give you a better guess right now, Larry, but to me, that Alex Mack decision really is what I think a lot of this hinges on.
Oh, no, it's interesting. And then what makes it even more interesting is that John Lynch in the pre-draft presser came out and said, hey, you know what? In our system, we don't feel like, it has to be a veteran player. Like it could be a young player. We don't put all of the line calls on the center. And, because of that, we can start a young player. We can start an inexperienced player. We can start a prospect that we like. So who knows? Maybe that means Poe. Maybe that means West. Maybe that means Zakel. Maybe it means Brunskill. Maybe Matt comes back. I really don't know. I'll tell you the guy that I'm really eager to see because, one thing about Banks, okay, yeah, Banks was drafted in the second round. But we haven't seen Banks, so we don't really know exactly how Banks is going to look. We saw Jalen Moore last year in the preseason play tackle and play it, I thought, at a decent level. Then Tom Compton beat him out at the end of the year, and Jalen Moore couldn't get on the field. I like Jalen Moore. I liked him coming out of college. I thought he looked good in the preseason. Heck, he played left tackle for some snaps in the preseason and looked pretty good. So I'm eager to see where's Jalen Moore in his development. Where's Aaron Banks? Obviously, they had a ton of confidence in a big situation to go with Colton McKivitz. Does that mean McKivitz, once upon a time, was a gold helmet guy, their premier draft designation? Do they still feel the same way about McKivitz? I don't know who's going to start, but I think to me, it seems like this is the one thing about the 49ers that would make me a little gun shy about rolling into a casino and dropping money on them is their O-line. It looks on paper like Trent Williams and 4 question marks. And that makes me nervous.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Right now, there's so much unknown, and it's always something that you would like to be, have taken care of, even with a veteran quarterback. When you're thinking about a guy transitioning to that, first time being the prominent QB1 on the roster, you don't want to have 3 rookies and or first-time starters on the interior in front of him. And right now it feels like that's a very real possibility for the 49ers because I really like Nick Zakel. Like if I had to bet who would be amongst those young players to take that center spot from day one if they were to go that way, I think it would be Zakel. I got to speak with his offensive line coach from Fordham, and he talked about how Zakel approached him and wanted to get in as many reps as possible at center to be as versatile as possible for NFL teams. And he said it was something where he just picked it up. He was a natural. His snaps were clean. He really did a great job IDing defenses and all the little nuances that come with playing the position. But I agree with you. It really doesn't feel great beyond Trent Williams. And I'm a big believer in Dan Brunskill. I think for the price they're paying him, the cap hit that he's, counting against the cap, I think he's more than serviceable as a starting interior offensive lineman. But beyond those two, we don't know what you're getting from McGlinchey right now with the quad injury he's rehabbing from. And again, as good as Jalen Moore could be, as good as Aaron Banks could be, it really is kind of steeped in uncertainty right now. And that's not something you want to feel good about if you are rolling into Caesars or somewhere in Vegas and throwing down a big futures bet.
Hey, if you check out Niners Nation, read Jordan Elliott. He's really, really good. Gammon Brown throws a donation in here. He says, ad just popped up, local singles in my area. There you go, Gammon. What can I say? If it works for you, bro. Clown Man weighing in. He says, Larry K, the best 49er YouTuber on the net. I don't know about that. Experience and morally correct. Wow, good man over here. I appreciate that. Let's talk about the secondary. That's a huge question as well. Matt Barrows had an interesting little anecdote. I said, give me some guys who stood out at rookie minicamp. And he went to Quantrez Knight. And I loved Quantrez Knight at UCLA. I thought the Bruins had an underrated secondary. He wore 24 for them. And he can play that nickel. And it's like, the Niners have him, or at least our lads depth chart has him listed as a strong safety. I do see him as kind of a player that's really good against the run in the box, but I'm not sure if he's a corner or if he's a safety, if he's a special teamer strictly. But to me, that's going to be an interesting group to watch. I mean, obviously they drafted Samuel Womack, they drafted Tariq Castro-Fields, and then after the draft, Taylor Hawkins. San Diego State had a really good D, and then Leon O'Neal. I'm an A&M fan. I watch A&M every week. I'm an O'Neal fan, and he's already made some highlight plays. I think he's going to be better in the NFL than he was at A&M. And then Quantrez Knight from the Bruins. that's 5 additions of guys that I think have a reasonable chance to compete for a roster spot. How do you see the Niners secondary? I'm expecting those guys to impact things. I'm really expecting Talanoa Hufanga to step in and show that he's not just a starter at safety, but that he's an outstanding young player. And I think he'll get better physically from last year to this year. I'm expecting Hufanga to make a big step forward this summer. Give me your thoughts on the Niners secondary. They also brought in George Odom from the Colts in free agency.
So right now, I think the only sure things you're getting is Jimmy Ward at that free safety spot, Tarvarius Ward outside, and Emmanuel Mosley, whether they put him on the interior or the outside. I thought them bringing back Verrett really did open up possibilities, because that maybe will allow them to kick Mosley in full time, and then you could have Verrett and Ward on the outside, and then you're not rushed into throwing in one of those rookies at that nickel corner spot, because I think that's a position that needs to get addressed as the starting position that it is in the modern NFL. It feels like a lot of teams still treat it as a specialized role in sub packages, but when you're in these sub packages 3/4 of the time in the modern NFL, that player is playing a starter's amount of snaps. So I would feel much more confident if I was the 49ers having 3 veterans across the board at those corner positions. And then, if Jason Verrett's unfortunate injury history happens to pop up again, you have the ability to kick Mosley out, and then maybe you do have one of those guys you mentioned come in. Maybe they still feel really good about Diamador Lenore, somebody they said that they kind of profiled as a slot corner when they selected him. But to me, the biggest question really comes back to what you mentioned with the safety spot, because I was a big believer in what Jaquiski Tartt brought to the table. I thought he did a lot of things that may not have showed up on a stat sheet game to game. And I know people talk about the lack of turnovers from the safety position, but he was a very solid player. And I thought the fact that they were so willing, it appears, to move on from him and then not invest a high amount of draft capital into the safety position tells me that they feel really good about one or both of George Odom and Hufanga. And I think that what they're going to do is allow those two to kind of battle it out for that safety spot opposite Jimmy Ward. I was impressed with Odom, to be honest. When I first saw the signing, I was like, hey, you're getting a special teams ace. The special teams was by far the weakest link of the team last year. It makes sense. You're getting guys like him and Oren Burks. But the more and more I watched, the more I sat there and was like, well, he has some pretty good physical traits. His game film's actually pretty impressive for the spot starts he's had at that safety spot. So I think the 49ers are going to feel comfortable having Jimmy Ward be the number 1, and then some order of Hufanga and Odom following behind that, because we saw them go to a good amount of 3 safety sets last year where they were coming out and spinning one down, staying in a too high shell, but having a guy like Jimmy Ward who can spin down and then match up in the slot with a player like Cooper Kupp, who you're going to see 2 times a year. So that to me would probably be the best ideal scenario for the secondary. You have Ward on the outside, then Mosley or Verrett, whatever they want to do at the other corner spots, and then Jimmy Ward with that pairing of Hufanga and Odom. And one of them will obviously get a role to, or a path, to larger amount of snaps, but I do think you'll see the 3 of them on the field together much more than one would expect.
Gammon Brown donates $2. He says Jaquiski Tartt should still be on the team. I don't think Tartt was the reason they lost. I mean, that to me, that just, should he have caught the interception? Sure. But I mean, he didn't basically go 3 and out the next 2 drives. 49ers had 2 offensive drives after that dropped interception and didn't move a yard. So I don't know. I mean, I have a hard time blaming Jaquiski for losing that game to the Rams. But I understand. And to me, I think Hufanga is interesting because, Hufanga is really, really good as far as timing on all the short and intermediate stuff. I mean, he arrives on time with some real thump, and that's a real skill. He breaks down in space like a far more athletic guy. He plays like a player who tests much better than he tested. And I expect in year 2, in a year in an NFL, defense and the NFL weight room, NFL conditioning, that he's going to show up better, more sudden, more knowledgeable, playing faster. And I was really impressed at the end of the year. I mean, Green Bay tried him in the middle of the field in the biggest play of that game. He stood up in coverage, and I think he's that kind of a player. I think Hufanga is going to take it to the next level. I'm not, Tom Brady was, this level athlete, and then he just worked and worked and worked. I think you could argue that Brady was a better athlete deeper into his career as he got around NFL nutrition, NFL lifestyle. I think the same thing is going to be said for Hufanga. I think he's going to be more sudden, more explosive, playing faster, and I think that's going to be the difference. I think he's going to be an exceptional strong safety next to Jimmy Ward. Now, my big question is, how much longer can Ward, stand up covering the field? Because the box safety is in the box, but the coverage safety, that's a tough spot. And if Ward goes down, then what? Is it Taylor Hawkins? Is it is it Castro Fields? I don't believe it's Tarvarius Moore. I'm not a Tarvarius Moore guy. So that's my big question there. As far as Kalia Davis, what do you expect from him? Do you think the Niners, I've heard rumors they may cut Ebukam for cap reasons. They're exceptionally deep on the defensive line. I don't think Kalia Davis is going to wind up playing this year. Give me your thoughts on their D-line.
I think the D-line is in a great spot. I think there's going to be a similar situation to last year where you have too many talented players and not enough roster spots for them. I think that ultimately they're going to end up cutting 2 or 3 players by the end of training camp that will immediately be picked up and stick on an NFL roster elsewhere for the remainder of the season. I'm with you on Davis. I think that he's somebody that they looked at. Personally, when I saw his tape, I thought he looked really good as a 0 tech, as a 1 tech, looked great against the run, had a little bit of that kind of elusiveness that we saw from DJ Jones, where he was somebody that was a large, human being, but he had kind of like this slipperiness to him. And I think that they kind of are of that mindset where, hey, we got DJ Jones in the 6th round. We got tremendous value with a player with similar physical traits and a similar style of play. Let's kind of throw a dart at the dartboard again and hope we hit on it, because I think it's unfair to expect Kalia Davis to come in and be DJ Jones, who I thought was one of the most important players on the team the last couple seasons. But he does remind me a lot of him in terms of what he can give you from that nose tackle position. But yeah, I agree. And like you think about some of the additions they made, I just think that they're so deep. And I think people are forgetting too that like Javon Kinlaw, everything we're hearing is that he's somebody who's coming back. His knee looks like it's in the best shape it's been since he's been in the NFL. And I thought Kinlaw, even in some of those starts his rookie year, flashed this immense potential where people want the sack numbers. They want the forced fumbles and the stuff that DeForest Buckner was doing before Kinlaw ultimately replaced him. But what Kinlaw was doing while he was figuring out the NFL and refining his game was being this massive gap stuffer, that was in there, occupying multiple offensive linemen, freeing things up for guys like Fred Warner and Greenlaw to come in and make plays behind him. And I just think that people are kind of overlooking what he will bring to that defense when you're thinking about having Nick Bosa, Armstead, Kinlaw, and then somebody like Ebukam or Drake Jackson on the outside. They have a tremendous front four that's going to be going out there as that kind of alpha unit, but their depth is incredible as well. So I still think the defensive line is the heart and soul of the team, and they will go as far as that group takes them. You remember last season, the defensive line, I didn't think played all that well the first half of the season. And then when Arden Key really hit his stride, Ebukam hit his stride, and they really started ramping up pressure. They moved Armstead to that 3-tech spot. That defensive line is really what propelled them on that late surge and through the playoffs in my eyes. And I think that that's how they've really come together to want to construct this team. That's what their primary goal is to ride that defensive line. And I think we'll see the same thing this season, where that's going to ultimately be the strongest position group on the team.
Gammon Brown donates $5 more. He says Hufanga won't get faster. Tarvarius Moore takes poor angles. Hufanga more equal or plus Tart. Hufanga doesn't make that game-saving tackle against Green Bay in the playoffs. Well, we'll agree to disagree on that one, Gammon Brown, but we do appreciate the donations as always. Couple last things before we let you go, but why don't we do this? Why don't we pay the bills since we have a couple sponsors? Let's get them and some love and maybe take down this comment there so they can pick people that can actually see the brand, the logo. Telemetrics.co is one of our sponsors. And man, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, an occupational therapist, a chiropractor, a physical therapist, Telemetrics is designed for you to use in your practice. Will greatly benefit your patients. What is Telemetrics? Telemetrics uses computer vision and artificial intelligence and provides a platform for outpatient rehab therapy services, both in the clinical and telehealth environments. Using Telemetrics can improve your patient's experience and much more. So for all your sports injury needs, or if you're a physical rehabilitation specialist of any kind, make sure you go to telemetrics.co. And thanks to Casey Bateman and all the good people at Telemetrics. And also thanks to Dan Coach Emilio, securemoney.com. Give Danny a call. He's a retirement planning specialist, 925-628-9966. He's got over 25 years of experience. Give him a call at, once again, 925-628-9966, securemoney.com on the web. Also, thanks to New York Style Italian Sausage. And if you want to pick up the Krueger Show t-shirt, hit Casero's Italian Menswear in Dublin, 7372 San Ramon Road in Dublin. And thanks to all of them for being proud sponsors of the Krueger Show. All right, a couple last moments with Jordan Elliott before we say goodbye. And Jordan, I love having you on, man. You're a wealth of information. The Niner linebacking core, to me, is really interesting. Why? Because I think annually it's among the fastest and most instinctive and deepest positions in the league at that spot, but also just on their roster, I think it's really deep. Fred Warner, all-pro type linebacker. Dre Greenlaw played at a very high level last year when he got healthy. Azeez Al-Shaair, I thought played like a Pro Bowler when he was healthy. Then they signed Oren Burks away from Green Bay. Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, converted defensive back who moves really well. Curtis Robinson, the Stanford kid, is an outstanding special teamer. We just had Matt Barrows on. I said, who looked good in minicamp? He said the San Diego State linebacker, Saguna Luby, who ran 4.45. And then Jeremiah Gemmel, if you watch ACC football, they called him the general, and he made a ton of tackles, and the Niners guaranteed him, I think, $100,000 or something like that to keep him away from other people in the undrafted market. So obviously they like him. Linebacker is really an intriguing spot for the 49ers. There were even some guys who just got workouts this weekend that opened my eyes. A guy named Baldwin looked really, really good. What do you think of the linebacking core? It seems like there's no end to the 4.45, the 4.55, the fast, instinctive Niner linebacker. I mean, it's amazing how well they stock that position.
It's incredible. And I think it comes back to an organizational philosophy that they're committed to, where it feels like when they're targeting these linebackers in the draft, they're really valuing these guys with defensive backgrounds, guys who are safeties that they can convert to linebacker. Dre Greenlaw was a converted safety. Flanagan-Fowles, as you mentioned, Azeez Al-Shaair. All these guys have a history of playing that defensive backfield. And even a guy like Fred Warner, if you go back and look at his college tape at BYU, he was essentially playing in no man's land somewhere between a slot corner and a linebacker. So he was kind of, while he may not have the official background that some of them do, he has that ability to play out in space, which is why I think he's one of the better coverage linebackers in football, if not the best, because he has that history of doing that. So I think that they're really in a position where you never want to lose a player, but you're going to end up losing guys week to week in the NFL at certain points. And they're in a spot where if a Fred Warner or a Dre Greenlaw goes down, a player like a Flanagan-Fowles, a player like an Oren Burks can step in. And I think as we saw last season, I believe in the game that Al-Shaair left, I think it was the Vikings game, if I recall correctly, or maybe it was Warner. I apologize off the top of my head. I'm blanking here. But I know Flanagan-Fowles stepped in and was one of the starting linebackers for them when they were getting down into that depth chart. And they didn't miss a beat defensively. And there were times last season where, with all due respect to Fred Warner, I think he's an all-pro level player. I thought Azeez Al-Shaair was the best linebacker on that team. And I thought that that's really, it's really saying something when Fred Warner's on that same team. And I think that they're in a position of so much strength even when you're getting into these nickel packages and these sub packages, having Al-Shaair and Fred Warner out there in space is a luxury that very few teams have. So I'm with you. That sideline to sideline speed really is unmatched. And I think so much of it does come back to the fact that they're really coveting these guys who have that defensive backfield in their football history. and they have that experience they're bringing where they're going to be a little bit better in space. As a result, they're not going to be that classic inside backer, with the horse collar on the back and
the neck roll, the
big neck roll on the back. Yeah, it felt like they really kind of revolutionized the position before a lot of other teams in the NFL caught up to that. And I thought that they really obviously set the gold standard with that with a player like Fred Warner. But again, don't sleep on Azeez Al-Shaair. It's so funny at the beginning of last season, Larry, I was like, hey, I think he's better than Dre Greenlaw. That's no disrespect to Greenlaw. I just think that Al-Shaair is a really special player. And it's really cool to see the transition where people, I was called crazy when that first happened. And now he's getting that recognition that he's long deserved. So I think the 49ers are in a great spot where when they're going out in that base 4-3, I think you could stack the starting three with Greenlaw, Warner, and Al-Shaair up against any other three in the NFL.
Yeah, and credit the Niner scouts. By the way, Al-Shaair and Greenlaw are both free agents at the end of the year, according to Brash Cat. The thing about Niner scouts, Al-Shaair, I think had like 430 something tackles in college, but he had an ACL, and he had some real tragedy in his life. He saved his family from a grease fire in the kitchen. But man, you turn on the film, and this guy plays fast, and he shows up in an angry disposition and just delivers a thump. And you can see he loves to hit, he loves to run, and that's a great combo. Going back to Bowman and Willis, the Niners have had that second level locked down for years now, and they find these fast, instinctive guys who close down space as well as any group of linebackers in the league. All right, let's finish with Jimmy Garoppolo. What's the end game here, Jordan? If you had to bet everything you own on Jimmy suits up in camp this summer or never suits up for the Niners again, what are you betting on?
I would bet that he does, but simply based off the fact that the 49ers are going to go through every possible motion to make it appear that, like, hey, if you're not giving us what we want, if you're not giving us the offers we're trying to get for Jimmy Garoppolo, we'll throw him out there during training camp. We'll subtly start releasing these videos of him throwing during camp. I don't think it's going to be with the intention of keeping him on the roster. I do think he will get moved, but based on the timing, I don't think any team moves any kind of capital, even if it's a day 3 pick, until he can pass that physical. There are so many question marks with how that shoulder will heal. When will he be able to throw? How much time will he have to really work with a new team, get familiar with the offense, build chemistry with other players? So I see it happening sometime in early August, and by then you're kind of well within training camp already. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. I would say it's more likely than not that he does suit up at some point during camp. But I don't think, again, that it's with the intention of creating a quarterback competition or having him on the roster. Financially, it doesn't make very much sense. And at a certain point, the 49ers moved mountains to select Trey Lance. They have to see what they have in him. And I think based on everything we're hearing and based on how much he's at the facility and the things we're seeing in the offseason, it feels like they're telling him behind closed doors, like, the time is now for you. They're just not really coming out and saying that publicly, I'd imagine, because while they may not have much leverage to begin with in trade talks for Jimmy Garoppolo, that kind of erases all of it when you basically come out and say we're going to be starting Trey Lance no matter what. But that really does feel like the direction it's heading.
Gammon is donating again. We will play against Jimmy week 5 in Carolina. Do you agree with Gammon? Is Jimmy's next home in Carolina with the Panthers?
I think they'd be really wise to make that deal because I think Matt Rule is absolutely on the hot seat. I think that Sam Darnold, frankly, has proven to just not be a very good NFL quarterback. And I think that the Panthers are a team, while they're not as talented as the 49ers are, they're a team that has a solid run game. They have some good skill position guys. DJ Moore is a very, very underrated receiver. He's very talented. And they have a very strong defense as well. I think they had a defense that ranked within the top 5 last season. And that's something that didn't really get talked about much because the rest of the team wasn't very good. They obviously didn't make the playoffs. But Jimmy Garoppolo has shown if you put him in a situation where he has a strong running game to lean on, he has players who can create after the catch, and he has a defense that's going to keep them in games, he can be somebody that can win you 9 or 10 games. And for the Panthers right now, they shouldn't be sitting here wondering how they're going to win the Super Bowl in 2022 because the odds of that are very slim. They need a winning season. They need something to build on. And to me, Jimmy Garoppolo gives them a much better chance to achieve that 9-10 win range, sneak into the playoffs, maybe steal a game in the playoffs than Sam Darnold or Matt Corral would.
This one's interesting to me. Bryant Culp says Jimmy's going to Seattle. Let's say the Niners have already fleshed out every possible trade option and there's nobody willing to give them anything. And they know they're going to have to cut Jimmy. And they want to spend the money on Debo and Bosa's contract extensions. Don't they just wait till the beginning of, day one of camp and cut him loose? And then if he goes to Seattle, okay, let him figure it out from there. Don't cut him today and give him 2 months to learn Seattle's offense and maybe spit secrets to Seattle. I mean, I don't know. I asked Softy Mahler about that up in KGR, and he's like, we don't want Jimmy Garoppolo. But I got to think Jimmy Garoppolo is at least on par with Drew Lock, Geno Smith, and Jacob Eason. I mean, come on, who we kidding here, right? I mean, Jimmy's an upgrade on those donkeys, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I think it's something where, a lot of people who've seen Jimmy play regularly, whether it's 49ers fans, NFC West opponents, they've seen bad Jimmy. But I think the thing is that a lot of teams haven't seen how much worse it gets from bad Jimmy. And even Jimmy on his worst day is an upgrade over a number of quarterbacks in the NFL, which is why, to be honest with you, I think it does come back to the surgery, Larry. But I was shocked that they didn't get something for him at this point, because that was my whole thinking going into it, was while I thought the first, second round picks were a little – that was kind of a pipe dream. I didn't think that was ever going to happen. I thought somebody would give up a, third round pick, maybe a conditional fourth that turns into a 3, something, because there is just that you could do much worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. And there are quarterbacks who will be starting the season who are worse than Jimmy Garoppolo. I just think some people are jaded that are maybe locked into the NFC West or the 49ers specifically, where they're not seeing how much worse it gets. I personally, again, I'm not a big Jimmy Garoppolo guy, but I've watched enough game film on other quarterbacks around the league where I would confidently take Jimmy over them, especially at the cost of a 5th round pick or whatever it would cost to get it done at this point.
Gammon Brown parting with $2 more. He says, honestly, rank these quarterbacks, Jimmy, Darnold, and Mitch. I guess he means Mitchell. Mitchell, don't call me Mitch. Trubisky. I would take Jimmy 1. I would probably take Mr. Biscuit 2, and then you can turn over Sam Darnold. Will be number 3 for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. I'm notorious for being a believer in Mitch Trubisky, where I think he can be a decent NFL quarterback if he's put in the right system. So it's a big year for the brand, Larry. It'll be interesting to see how it goes this year with him in Pittsburgh, where I think he has a path to being that starter. But I don't see how you could take either of those guys over Jimmy based on the track record that Jimmy has. And again, I think the biggest problem that I had for a while personally is that I got so caught up in some of the what felt like boneheaded throws where he was missing easy reads in his progressions, where he was sailing balls that no NFL quarterback has any business missing, that it made me overlook so many of the little things that Jimmy does. And what Jimmy is able to do is execute in that short to intermediate area. He's shown that he can extend drives on 3rd down, come in clutch when you need to get a conversion, you need to keep the chains moving. And I just haven't seen enough of that from the other 2 guys to confidently say that they would be better than Jimmy. If you start talking physical skill sets, then it's a totally different discussion. But if we're talking total package here, Jimmy has to be number 1, right?
Some of these comments are making me laugh. Mark Graves says, Gammon making it rain. Making it rain. And then Bryant Culp says, everyone thinks it's funny Jimmy G in Seattle can sweep us. If Jimmy G goes to Seattle and Seattle sweeps the Niners, is Lynch out at the end of the year, or is his job security go well beyond Jimmy and whatever he can or can't get in a trade?
I think John Lynch is fine, but that would feel like the most 49ers Seahawks thing to ever happen, right, Larry? Like the Seahawks could end up winning 4 or 5 games next year, but 2 of them would be against the 49ers. While the 49ers go to the playoffs, you'd still have Seahawks fans chirping at them about how they swept them. And to me, that would be the funniest thing ever, because again, like maybe Jimmy doesn't have the greatest season in Seattle, but those 2 games against the 49ers, he's throwing for 350 and 3 touchdowns in each of them. Like it just feels like that's how it's going to go at this point.
Jordan, I love reading your tweets, man. Keep it up. I love reading your stuff on Niners Nation. I think you're fantastic. Hopefully you'll be willing to come back and rap with us again. I love the stuff you put out there on this team, and keep it up, man. And tell people what you're working on right now. If they go to Niners Nation in the next few days, what has the great Jordan Elliott got cooking?
Thank you so much, Larry. It's a pleasure. I'd be happy to anytime. This truly was an honor for me. Right now, what I'm really focused on is kind of trying to get 49ers fans familiar with these draft selections that were just made, with these undrafted guys who I believe have a chance of sticking on the 53 or at the very least competing late into camp. So what I've been doing is conversing with college position coaches, head coaches, former players, people who have a little bit of different insight on some of these guys. So last week I did a piece on Nick Zakel, the offensive lineman out of Fordham. I got to speak with his offensive line coach. Being somebody who worked with Nick every day gave me some great insight, was telling me about how when COVID happened and the whole program was shut down, Nick was in his driveway in snowy Cleveland, shoveling his driveway to do pass sets, which, not a lot of guys were doing. Everything was shut down. And this guy kind of brought that mentality where he's going to be working hard every day. I had the pleasure of speaking with Herm Edwards last week as well. He talked to me a bit about Donovan West. I spoke with Jeff Collins, the head coach at Georgia Tech, who coached Jordan Mason, who I think will be the next undrafted running back that sticks for the 49ers.
Yeah,
I think I do. I think he's going to end up making the 53. I have. That's actually what I'm working on today when I'm done speaking with you, Larry. So it should be going out tomorrow morning. But I got some great quotes from Coach Collins about that. So for the next couple weeks or so, I'm basically going to be doing that, really trying to do these player profiles, get people familiar, maybe get some stories that we didn't hear during the draft process, some stuff behind the scenes, how they are with teammates, how they are studying film. And it's really funny because people are like, well, what are they going to say, bad things about the players they coach? And you'd be surprised how honest a lot of these coaches are if you talk to them. So I've gotten some really, really good insight about some of these guys. And anybody looking for new information or trying to get familiar with some of these draft picks, if you go to Niners Nation, all that stuff should be there.
Dude, that stuff's freaking gold. And you're absolutely right. You'd be shocked. People, you ask enough people the questions, they're going to tell you the truth. The truth about these players more times than not. Miria 49 Faithful Lee says, go subscribe to Jordan. He's truly an awesome guy. Hey, man, awesome. I'm a huge fan of your stuff. Keep up the great work. Come back and visit us again. We'd love to have you on because your stuff is really top notch. I'm that guy who's like, wait, he just wrote an article on Jordan Elliott. Do the deep dive, read that thing top to bottom. So keep up the great work, man. Real Niner fans are psyched with the stuff that you put out there.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll be honest with you, this is super cool for me. I'm from Redwood City originally, so I can't tell you how many countless hours I spent listening to you on KMBR. So this is truly an honor for me to get the chance to speak with you.
Hey, maybe we'll do a regular thing during the season. We'll talk a little ball throughout the year because I think you do an incredible job. We had Brad on the other day. Brad does an incredible job. I'm just meeting so many people in the kind of the Niner media world, and they're fantastic. So keep it up, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Larry.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one, I don't need to hassle. Yeah.